it's not that banking is a problem. I just believe we've got the wrong person behind the desk.
You're listening to the Presidential Experience Podcast, the place where we chronicle man's search for meaning over money. I'm your host, Kanae Corder, National Certified Counselor and Clinical Hypnotherapist specializing in financial therapy for high achievers. As a former Morgan Stanley financial advisor, I realized that high achievers needed help with more than just the numbers. And I bring a unique set of skills to my private practice as I guide CEOs and high achievers on how to manage their stress so they can enjoy their success. I want to bring some of that to you here. So each week, we'll start a discussion addressing one of the top stressors for high achievers. You've built a stellar resume. Now it's time for you to build a stellar life. Your hard work brought you money. Now it's time to turn that money into meaning here on the Presidential Experience Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to Presidential Experience. I'm so glad you're here. And as you know, it is Financial Awareness Month, and we're going to just talk a little bit about not the normal stuff that you usually hear during Financial Awareness Month, but something different. And that's what I'm so excited about today, because this conversation is not had enough. And I'm really excited about our conversation today because it's a strategy that I've tried to employ over the years. I could do better at it, and I'll be doing more of it later. But our guest today is going to tell us about how to do a new strategy. Well, it's not new, but it might be new to some of you because we're not talking about the normal, everyday financial awareness stuff. No, not here, not on Presidential Experience. Our guest today is Mark Willis, and Mark is a certified financial planner, a two-time #1 best-selling author, and the owner of Lake Growth Financial Services in Chicago, Illinois. Yay, my hometown. It's a financial services firm, and Mark is doing some great things over at Lake Growth Financial Services. And what he's going to talk to us today is one subject that you may not have heard a lot about, and that is how to be your own bank. But of course, we're always talking about stress. So we're going to weave in how using a CFP can help you reduce your stress. So I know you are ready to jump right in. So please join me in welcoming our guest today, Mark Willis. Hey, Mark.
Hey there, how are you?
I am awesome and ready to learn and maybe even employ by the end of this conversation some new strategies.
Glad to be here. Me too.
Yes. So I think we talked a little bit before, but the first question we ask every guest is, what is your idea of prosperity?
You know, if you have a bunch of zeros in your bank account, but no one wants to be around you, that doesn't seem like prosperity to me. So I learned from a mentor a long time ago that sanity is one of the biggest assets on your column. If you can have a sane life, and we can talk about what sanity means and maybe the lacking commodity of sanity in most of our lives. I think our culture promotes insanity. But if you can find sanity, you can be prosperous no matter what your bank account says.
Nice. That's a new one. I have not heard that one before because I've asked that question of a lot of people. And sanity is so true because some of the things like the stress that our lifestyles can give us can bring us insanity. So being able to feel sane through this journey to the money or the retirement or the building of the business or whatever you are journeying to, that's a great way to put it. And I like what you said about if you have all those zeros, yet nobody wants to be around you, meaning you don't have the love or the connection in your life, it's just not going to be a prosperous life.
That's right. Yeah, keeping the main thing, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And whatever that is for you, because what I find is that prosperity means different things to different people. So whatever your main thing is, needs to be your main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you. I do too. Thanks for sharing that. I love that so much.
We can end the episode right now, I think.
I know, right? That's it.
Yeah, everything else is just the ellipses after that. I really do think that, if it's call the word balance, call it abundance, call it sanity. But if you found a right relationship with this thing called life, then you're the one that's enjoying finding peace, prosperity, abundance in what you're living. If you have the world imposing on you, and if you're running harried from place to place, person to person, event to event, gold star to gold star, whatever those gold stars are, whether they're paychecks or whether they're affirmations from a parent in the sky, let's say, then you're never going to be satisfied, right? So
Mm.
finding that peace, that sanity, that right approach to life is. Some people call it shalom. It's a really cool way to live if you can find it, but it's so hard to find. It's a rare commodity in our world today.
It is, and that's why we teach it in our program. And what we call it here at Presidential Experience is harmony.
Harmony, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know how if you're at a concert, symphony, there are all these different instruments and they're all playing at different rates and at different sounds. And then there's like that one instrument that only plays one time the whole darn symphony. Ding, or what.
Yep.
And so like that's like your life. Some of these things are constant and always there. Other things you just touch on here or there every once in a while. Some things are blaring and loud, other things are slow and soft. And if you can just find that right mix so everything is playing like concert, it's like harmony.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a reason I think maybe that the orchestra sets in to get to that tuning A. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm,
Before they begin
yeah. Yep.
their syncopated music and beauty, they start with a tuning A, meaning they get their all their instruments aligned with the same tune. Because
Mm-hmm.
they could all be a little out of tune, and then the rest of the concert is ruined if we don't get it straight from the beginning. So that's why I'm so excited to be on your show today to sort of think carefully about that tuning A for your financial life.
Yes. And you just like brought my analogy home. I love it.
Fun
I'm
times.
I'm the queen of analogies, and I
Awesome.
just love how you just put the icing on that cake because it was gorgeous already, but you just made it like award winning. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, let me kind of sorry to mix analogies, but let's use the analogy of a movie. Most of us enter our financial lives sort of like walking into a movie 45 minutes late. You
Mm,
ever done that? Or
ooh,
you walk into an opera or a play or a movie, and you're like, who's this person on the screen?
mhm,
Why did they just do that? Who punched who?
mhm.
Who's upset with who? Why did this happen? We enter our financial lives, the lives of our money, and just sort of handed a bank account and a bunch of student loans, and we're just sort of told to make it work. And here's your 401k, by the way, and oh, by the way, see you in 40 years, and maybe you'll have something in there. And most of us don't know why we're doing what we're doing with our money. We never got that tuning A. We never got the beginning of the story, so to speak. And unfortunately, too many American households are suffering as a result. There is no harmony when there's no tuning A at the beginning. If we don't get our heads around why we're doing what we're doing with our money, uh, we're up a creek, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And it is especially tough for like our listeners who are kind of in the middle. Our listeners are in the middle and at the end, like they've got some money, they want more of it, but they've got some. And they don't have 401k, or maybe they started it in their company because they own the company, but they didn't get handed that 401k and had to make those investment decisions as much as they had to start the 401k themselves or the SEP account or whatever the IRA they decided to use. But it can be even more confusing when you don't have, let's say, like a neutral third party, like somebody who could come in and say, hey, let me help you through this tough decision that you have to make.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not. It's not going to be automatic. The financial life that you want to live, much like your health or your relationships, you've got a choice. You can either take steps in a direction you want to go, or someone else will move you in the direction they want you to go. Whether that's banks, credit cards, finance companies, and hence stress. Right?
Yep.
If you're being drugged down the block by a bunch of bullies, then that's going to throw sanity right out the window, harmony right out the window, and stress ensues.
Yes, and I like totally just pictured that. So,
Well, and it's not uncommon, unfortunately. The average American, according to the economic well-being of U.S. households, this is a Federal Reserve report, Kene, that came out a few years ago. They said that 47% of American households say that they could not cover an emergency of $400 or more without selling something or going into debt.
yeah, and that's so sad. And a lot of our listeners, that number is probably like, $4,000 because
Hmm.
although our listeners have a good deal of money, they're also spending a good deal of
Right.
money.
Hmm.
So that number is still there. It might not be
Right.
400, but it's a number, right? And if and
Right.
if an emergency, and the more money you have, the more your emergencies cost, right? I had a early on in my career, I had a client buy a Range Rover, and it was his first luxury vehicle, and like brakes were like $1,500 now, not
Hmm.
$150, and
Yep.
he was like,
Bigger problems. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
right. And I was like, hey, those Range Rover problems. You the one wanted a Range Rover. I didn't tell you to
That's
go out
right.
and buy. That was not part of our plan, but you went out and bought it. So
Yeah.
like having to adjust those to those new challenges. The saying is more money, more problems, but I like to say more money, different problems.
Yeah.
And so it's not more of them. You have not being able to turn on you, knowing whether your lights are going to be on when you get home and how much food you're going to have to eat this week. And that's some serious problems to have. So
Yeah.
when you get money, it's not that you have more problems, you just have different ones because now you know your lights are on. You got more expensive light bulbs and you got
Yeah.
12,000 lights instead of 12.
Yeah, you bet. Well, with
Mhm,
bigger or more complex numbers,
mhm.
the more stress we can feel.
Yeah.
I and I found that many times we have there's a group. Some people call it Henrys, high earners not rich yet.
Mm.
Where we've got high incomes, but we're spending as much as we're bringing in. In fact, I read another study that said 31%, or nearly 1 out of 3 people you walk by on the sidewalk, have no retirement savings at all, including 27% of people over age 60, according to Pew Charitable Trusts. And millennials are 40% more likely not to have retirement savings than Gen Xers, and 50% of people over 55 have no retirement savings at all.
Mm.
So I mean, it's tremendous, and in fact,
Yeah.
28% of Americans have more credit card debt than they have savings. And this is what really got me. Can I add, of all these statistics, we now have more debt today than we had at the height of the Great Recession, according to
Mm.
Federal Reserve of New York. And I looked it up. The average American is spending 35 and a half cents on your income is going towards servicing the interest payments on our debt. Just not
Wow.
the U.S. debt. We're talking individual families. So your
Right.
mortgages, your credit cards, your student loans. If you make let's say you make 100 grand, 36,000 bucks a year is going just to pay for the privilege of being in debt to other people.
Mhm.
That's going to throw stress. Here's where I see it playing out with a lot of our folks that we talk with, because we are in such debt. We have the average debt in this for American families is 136,000 bucks altogether with mortgage, everything else. That means we have to work harder. We have to work 60 hours a week, not 40, because we have to work that extra third of our day as slaves to a bank, right? If time is money and we're spending 36 cents on the dollar to servicing our debt, then that means we're literally working as a slave to the bank for a third of our day. That means we can't work for ourselves for a third of the day, which means we have to work a third more hours than we otherwise would need to. It's that simple. So we bring
Mhm.
both spouses have to go to work. We both have to work full and over full time jobs. We don't get to see the kids. Divorce rates go up.
Right,
Stress,
exactly.
health, it's all related, right?
And especially for our listeners who are business owners, because a lot
Exactly.
of times as a business owner, you're already burning the candle at both ends. You're already working more than you want to. You're bringing your laptop home. You're working from your phone. And when you think about you've overspent as well as you're in debt, then you have to work that much harder. So let's talk about then how do you become your own bank? You talked about these banks bullying us and dragging us down the road um,
Mhm.
because that's what they market to us really well and they tell us how much we need these things. And They draw us in, and then
Mhm.
they own us. So can you get your ownership back? How can you own yourself?
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of people listening would say, "Wow, I'm not like that average American. I'm not spending. My interest rates are low. I've got a 4% mortgage. My student loans might be 6%. My car loan might be 3 or 4%. I even have a few zero interest credit cards, right? But if
Yeah.
you weight all that together, maybe it's 8% average interest rates, but the volume is more important than the rate. Think of it like when you go to the doctor and you get an injection, like a flu vaccine or something. It's not so much the rate, the speed that injection goes into your arm. It's the volume. If he rolls up like 3 gallons of injection fluid and tries to put that in me, that would kill me, right? It's
Right,
not so
right.
much the rate, it's the volume that kills us. I mean, so I believe that banking is the biggest and most important financial function in our lives. Let me say that again. Banking is the most important financial function in all of our lives. There's a great book that came out a year or two ago called Debt: The First 5,000 Years.
Mm.
What a title, right? By
Yeah.
David. And it really drills down the fact that when you drive through your town, wherever you live, look around at what the biggest building is, and I would bet that it's a bank.
Yeah.
And I went to school in Texas, and there was always all these little tiny Texas towns, and there were usually 2 or only 3 main buildings on their little streets, and one was a bank. Obviously, the bank was always there. Then there was a church. Then there was a bar, in that order. And I kind of made a joke, and I said, first you go to the bank and they take all your money. Then you go to the church to pray, and then finally you end up at the bar.
Right. Yes. Now, I believe like banks get a bad they get a bad rap because banks are not forcing us to do any of this.
Right.
And when I started in finance, one of the first things I did was credit restoration. And I used to tell people all the time, it's not having debt is not what's bad. It's abusing debt, which is
Hmm.
bad. And so you can have plenty of debt. And for years, I've always had plenty of debt available to me,
Right.
but I don't necessarily use it, but it's there. And mainly because it's one of the fastest things to grow your credit score. That's part of it. But I know that the banks come to us at as soon as we go to college, they're ready to give us credit cards, but we still have a choice, right? We have a choice.
Right.
One, it sounds like we don't know all of our choices though. And so we go to the bank because we don't know we have other choices. So, what are some other choices besides going to the bank?
Yeah. Well, again, banking happens, and you're right. It's not about whether or not you participate in the banking system. You're already in the banking system. I just believe we're all sitting on the wrong side of the banker's desk. And honestly, it's not ever really occurred to most of us, myself included, that we might even become a banker. Like,
Hmm.
think of it this way: you're already in the banking business, but you're letting them control your finances rather than you becoming the banker and controlling it yourself. I kind of like, before we get into some specific financial strategies and tools and tactics that our clients use, Kane, which I really hope we get into, um, let's think of it in terms of an airplane. If your airplane is like most, if you're an airplane pilot, your airplane doesn't just fly in a vacuum, it flies in an environment, right? So we have to think like an airplane pilot. An airplane lifts off flying through the air. Let's say your airplane can go 100 miles an hour and you want to go from New York to Chicago, let's say. But the only problem is your 100-mile-an-hour airplane is being faced with a 345-mile-an-hour headwind coming right at you. No matter how hard you push, no matter how hard you try, you're going not towards Chicago, you're getting pushed out into the ocean, right? Because your airplane can only move at 100 and that wind is coming at you 345 miles an hour. So what do we do,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Hmm.
What do we do? Most of us think, well, let's just beat the banks and just pay cash for everything. Wait till that financial headwind dies down and we fly at 100 miles an hour. We're winning, right? Most people think that's as good as it gets, paying cash for everything. But you're right. We can't. It's not that banking is a problem. I just believe we've got the wrong person behind the desk. If you can do better than even paying cash, if you can literally pay yourself an interest that's currently going to banks, credit cards, finance companies, and become your own banker, you can get that 345 mile-an-hour headwind and wait until it becomes your tailwind. Now that little airplane that could only spin along at 100 miles an hour is being pushed by a massive force right behind you. And now you're moving towards Chicago at 445 miles an hour. That's awesome. That is the power of becoming your own banker, going from a headwind to a tailwind. But it's all about the right strategy and having the right mindset to think like a banker. And it has made all the difference in my life, my wife and my family's life, our clients' lives. It's brought more sanity, more peace, and your word, more harmony to our financial life because it's all synchronized. It's all tuned to the same A. If we wait for the banks to come to our rescue, it's never going to happen. Debt's been around for 5,000 years. We just have to
Yeah,
use it for our benefit, not them use us for their benefit.
sure. So let's see if we can jump into it. Feeling stressed, wondering what's it all about? Well, you're not alone. And maybe you're not ready for a private conversation yet. Take the Life of Meaning quiz. It's the first step in determining how close or far you are in creating a life of meaning. A study revealed 76% of Americans reported feeling stress either some or all of the time in the last 30 days. The number one cause of that stress was money, not because they don't have it, but because they want more of it. But life is about more than money. It's about meaning. So take the Life of Meaning quiz and move toward peace and away from stress. It's just a click away. Go to presidentiallifestyle.com/meaning-quiz. You'll get the answers you've been looking for. You'll determine how close or far you are from creating a life of meaning. How does that sound? Then click the link. The link is in the show notes. Go to presidentiallifestyle.com/meaning-quiz. Go now. If you're not quite ready for a private conversation, start here. What would be the best way for our listeners to understand these kind of strategies? Would it be like to create a scenario, you and I create a scenario of a particular type of client? Would it be to explain maybe a client you've had in the past? What would be the best way to show how this happens? Because I'm guessing that right now people are starting to get confused. Like, okay, you've said this be your own bank thing a couple of times, but how can I? How,
Yeah,
Mark? How do I
yeah,
do it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You're right. Your money needs a place to live. It's a cool concept to think and be your own banker. But how does it actually work? Even Tiger Woods, maybe he wants to, hit that birdie, but he's got to find the right clubs to make it work.
Mhm.
So we've got to find a strategy and a tool that'll help, pull that club out of your bag to actually get the ball down the fairway. So here's kind of some simple ways to think about it. Where your money lives makes it act differently. And so if we put our money in a 401k, or if we put our money in a hedge fund, or if we put our money in a savings account, that'll make our money act different, right? That seems obvious, but I cannot tell you. I think 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20, Kane, people have never really stopped to think about what they want their money to do for them.
Mhm.
So that's maybe one of the most important thought experiments is to just say, what do I want my money to do for me? Because where you keep your money makes it do different things. So here's a few characteristics. I started this thought exercise myself, and it helped me take the labels off financial products and vehicles. Mutual funds, insurance, annuities, all of those words have bias and ideas in people's minds because we've all heard radio hosts and everything else talk about each of those things. But let's just talk about function, right? What do I want my money to do for me? To become my own banker and to have sanity and harmony in my life financially, I'd want a good, decent rate of return that beats inflation. I'd want guarantees that the money is safe and going to grow and be and accessible to me for life's emergencies and opportunities. I'd want tax-free access to the money at any time, right? Without somebody waving a magic wand or waiting until I'm 59 and a half or some magical age, right? I'd want to be able to protect this money as a business owner. I'd want to be able to protect this money from lawsuits and creditors and people, sniffing around my net worth, and I'd want to keep it private and off the public radar, so to speak. What else? I wouldn't want to be riddled with investment fees and having someone else's hands in my cookie jar, so to speak. What else? Can you think of anything? Any characteristic? Like if you could just wave a magic wand, Kane, and make a perfect financial vehicle for you and what you want your money to do for you. Anything there that strikes you, or anything you'd add to that list?
No, I think you named it. I think you named it.
All right. I mean, I've had a number of meetings with folks there where that's the list, and maybe some more, right? Maybe we
Yeah.
want it to leave a legacy to our future generations. Maybe we want to use it in lieu of and as collateral for our business, and to grow our business and to leverage it into more and more wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take $1 and leverage it into many more. So, of all the financial vehicles I had to study in preparation to becoming a certified financial planning professional, I think I counted up to 450 different financial vehicles out there.
Wow.
But the one that really hit and checked all the marks for me was a modernized form of whole life insurance, dividend paying whole life insurance of all things. And that to me was the eye opener, because I had an initial bias against whole life insurance, right? So this is, right off the top, something that is very different than the kind that Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey love to hate on the radio shows.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah, okay. This type of whole life insurance has some specific modernizations or options or riders that are added to supercharge the growth inside the policy. And it's not just a death benefit. So, term insurance is the kind of life insurance you might rent for a while and gets more expensive and so forth. But whole life insurance is the kind that you own and builds up a living benefit, meaning your actual cash, your equity in the policy while you're on this side of heaven. And typically, to design this well, a bank on yourself type policy, we call it that, typically we cut those commissions to the agent or advisor who designs it by about 50 to 70%. So this is not our father's whole life insurance for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess I'll mention too that whole life insurance, Kane, has grown and increased in value, guaranteed, for over 160 years, guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never going to beat the best year of the stock market. It's going to be decent, middle single-digit cash on cash returns internally inside the policy. But it's certainly better than what we're getting in our money market accounts and CDs and other cash equivalents out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Now, this is really whole life and not like variable or universal life. This is real whole life.
Real whole life. I like
Okay.
that. Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of kissing cousins out there that I wouldn't go near for the banking purpose. There's always a purpose for every financial vehicle out there, but
Yes.
I do not recommend all those that you just listed: indexed universal life,
Mm-hmm.
variable universal. So many people have these policies, these type policies that are not dividend paying whole life, and they're ticking time bombs. We can get into why, but you really want to make sure it was structured and designed correctly. With dividend paying whole life, designed the bank on yourself way.
Okay, got it.
A couple other really quick things, then I'll hush about this and we can kind of go into a detail or case study if you'd like. Sure, happy to do that. It is not locking your money up when you put money into this policy. So like I said, it's guaranteed to grow, but you also still have liquid access to that cash for your business inventory, your business needs, your family needs. You could, do a kitchen remodel if you wanted to, or go to Disney World on the cash value. My wife and I spent a month in Hawaii with a policy, cash in our policy. So you can use this for anything you want, including running your business, which we can talk about an example of someone who went through that with the time we have today.
Okay.
And of course, it does allow you to become your own source of financing. You can use this policy as a line of credit for yourself and pay yourself. In essence, it's like being your own banker, in essence. Where you're paying yourself instead of having to rely on banks, credit cards, finance companies, begging them for a loan. Rather than that, you become your own source of financing, and you can beat your competition. If they're like most other average Americans, they're in debt up to their eyeballs too. So if you can just be your own source of financing, it's easy to beat people who are up to their eyeballs in debt.
Totally. So like we didn't talk about this, Mark, but because I know this strategy, and the reason why I know this strategy is because I used it in my past. So right around when the market crashed. I think at this point it was 2010. So 2008, 9, I was somewhat affected, but by 2010, I was so affected by the crash. It was like I was barely holding
Mm,
my business together, and I couldn't survive without my policy. Like
wow.
I ended up taking a lot of the money that I put in over the years out so I can continue to keep my business flowing. I would even be here still as an entrepreneur if it wasn't for this strategy. So I know this strategy works. I want us to get into some case studies or some examples that you have worked with, but I did want to share it with people that you can keep listening because it does work, because I have employed a similar version of this myself after the market crash in order to keep my business afloat. I used my insurance and paid it back, over the years.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's still there if I'll ever need it again to make it through another crash, or even to, like you said, fund a future. Like, say we want to grow the business and we need an influx of money. We don't have to go looking for venture capitalists or investors. We can go right to our policy.
Wow.
So
Well, your story is not uncommon, although that's a super cool story. We could talk about J.C. Penney, James Penney. Went through the Great Depression and had these policies for himself and used them to finance all of his payroll to keep his business open, which helped him survive and thrive and beat the competition. All those many decades ago. The
mm,
guy who helped start McDonald's, Ray Kroc, he used
mhm.
a life insurance policy loan to start the marketing campaign that made McDonald's what it is today. Presidential campaigns regularly from everyone from Hillary Clinton to John McCain, Barack Obama. I mean, they all have used whole life policies in financing their campaigns. But you don't have to be famous to have these policies. Although, Kine, that puts you in good company, I
I
guess.
know.
Um, yeah, so you can. In fact, I just did some research for a recent podcast episode. Babe Ruth, when he was signed with the Yankees, bought 5 life insurance policies to store the signing bonuses. Now,
Mm.
why would all these rich, wealthy people be doing this if Dave Ramsey is right? So, in fact, one of our recent episodes had a gentleman named Dan Proskauer. He's vice president of engineering at the United Health Group's Optimum unit out on the East Coast. And he's got a picture on our show notes. I'd be happy to send you the image if you want to use it.
Oh,
But
please.
he's been tracking his net worth since 1999, and you can watch it. I mean, he shows us his net worth up and down, up and down. Here's the rise and fall of the tech bubble. I'm looking at it right now. Here's the recovery, the paper losses and paper gains of the housing bubble, and then the market crash in 2008 and 9. And then in June of 2009, he opens his very first whole life policy. We call it a bank on yourself type whole life policy. Because there's a number of ways to design this, and the best way, in my opinion, is a bank on yourself type designed whole life policy. And his net worth has tripled in 10 years using the policy. It's unbelievable. It almost made 2008 and 9 look like noise, like financial noise on his net worth sheet, because everything you see is a steady march upward toward financial freedom, financial peace. And so
Mm.
that's a recent example, but
What was
happy
his
to
name?
talk more about that. His name's Dan, and his last name is Proskauer.
Okay.
And it was episode 118 of our podcast, which is Not Your Average Financial Podcast, if folks want to look that up.
Awesome. Yes, we'll put that in the show notes too, and that would be awesome. And we'll link to that episode as well.
Yeah, so there's some really cool ways we can think about this, but the whole life policy in principle is just a tool to help us toward that sanity or that harmony we talked about. If you get this right, everything else becomes easier or necessary. There's a great quote out there. It's a question, actually, Kine, that I write on my journal every single morning. And the question is, what can I do today such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary?
Mm.
And I think we could do the same thing with our money, right? Ask that question. If I could do one thing with my money today, such that by doing it, everything else is easier or unnecessary, what do I do? Where do I put my money such that by putting it there, everything else becomes easier? Well, if I have a bank, a source of funds that I can use for my business, for my family, then everything else becomes easier or unnecessary.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanna dig a little bit, and I know that I want to remind you guys that this podcast is not to say this is what you should do with your
Right.
life. This is general in nature, but I am going to get a bit more specific because we only have a few more minutes left. And this is such good information. And I know, guys, you're probably like, oh my gosh, this is good. I've not heard this strategy before, or I've heard this strategy before and been meaning to do it and haven't. So now's the time. This is your little spark to get you out there and doing it. And you can call Mark if he's going to tell us where he's licensed and who he can work with in just a minute. But let's say that I do run a multi-million dollar business, and maybe maybe I've come up against payroll, or maybe I want to grow the business and I need a influx of money. How much of a policy would I need to have in order to use this strategy? I mean, can I do
Mhm.
this with $100,000 strategy policy?
Mhm.
Do I need $1 million policy? Like, what do I need in order to do
Right.
this?
Yeah, the way we design these policies is not so much death benefit focused. That is
Okay.
there, and that's a nice bonus. And it is, of course, crucial to remember that this is life insurance, and we're going to leave
Yes.
our family and our business more than we could ever save for them. It's not an investment.
Yes.
But one thing that I typically design around is cash flow. What do you think you could set aside into a policy that stays safe and available for whatever you need? And then we design around those parameters. So it could be as little as a couple $100 a month, or as much as a couple $100,000 a year. I just got off the phone with some folks that do fishing off the East Coast, and they're doing a couple $100,000 a year into policies. So it's really up to you. I'll tell a quick story. Someone on the West Coast now, because we do work coast to coast. There was a business owner who had $1 million line of credit with the bank before he had set any of this up. And this is pre 2008. So he had $1 million, and he used that line of credit every day for getting his sales associates out there in the field and buying equipment. It was necessary. It was like oxygen to his business. But
Mhm.
the bank calls him up, like banks love to do, and termed out his loan. That means they took his loan from $1 million to $500,000. 2 weeks later, it went from $500,000 to $250,000. And then 2 weeks later, it was termed out over 5 years, which means he had to pay that entire $1 million line of credit back to the bank and survive in the business environment of 2008 in just 5 years. So he had 5 years to pay off that $1 million line of credit and keep his business floating at the same time. How can you possibly imagine he would
Mhm.
survive? So what he did was he set up a policy, a whole life policy, where he packed that money, everything he could, he packed into that policy. He said, I never
Mhm.
want to deal with banks ever again when they're the ones in control. So he funded his policy such to a point where he had $1 million line of credit in 5 years. And that's now his line of credit for his business. He no longer relies on a bank's line of credit, which can come and go with the wind, right? What's that
Mhm.
old quote by Mark Twain? A banker is a fellow who will lend you his umbrella when the sun is shining, but wants it back as soon as it starts to rain. So that's
Right.
those are big numbers, but you could do it with a couple $100 a month. I'd love to, of course, agree with you too that this is not a good fit for just anybody and everybody. You shouldn't just run out and get one of these for a couple of reasons. One, there is some insurance costs to the policy. Even a well-designed, efficient policy can, as you know, takes a few years to really
Mhm.
get up and running. Even though you can use it in the first 30 days, it does take some time to pay for those expenses for the policy. Um, Second, you don't have to be young and healthy and whatever, flush with years. Even if you've got a few extra candles on your birthday cake, you could still own the policy on a business partner or a family member if you, for some reason, have some health concern that might keep you from being the insured. And I would say, too, that don't do this strategy if you don't have a strategy or a habit of saving. If you're living
Mm.
on less than you, if you're living on more than you make, let's say, if you've got more month at the end of your money, this strategy probably won't work for you. It does require packing money away, all the regular disciplines of being a good saver and that sort of thing. So that's another kind of gotcha. Don't do this if this is your last two pennies, let's say.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Because as we mentioned before, you can make $1 million, but if you're spending $1 million, and a
Right.
half or whatever, you're still broke. So,
That's right. Yeah.
so this might not be the strategy for you. So, yeah, your spending habit is going to definitely determine if you don't have already a saving habit in place, or if you're living outside of your means, you're really not ready for this strategy yet.
That's right. Yeah. Better to work on budgeting, block and tackle, the regular stuff, and then figure. Now, I will say this: you don't have to be debt free before you start this. Let me explain what I
Oh,
mean.
yes.
We have a strategy called the snowbank method, tongue in cheek with the snowball method. But if you've ever heard of the debt snowball method, that's where you take all your debts and you pay them off one at a time. With your monthly payments. If folks are familiar with that. But what we've designed and have kind of trademarked is something called the debt snowbank method, where you still pay on all your debts, keep current, of course. But let's say that you've got some extra cash and you don't know where to put it. Should you put it toward your debt, or is there somewhere better? A lot of clients will say, Mark, I want to save, I want to get ready for my future, but I got to pay off all this debt first. And I've got $100,000 in student loan debt. In fact, I'll tell you my story. My wife and I, we had $120,000 of student loan debt and no plan to pay it off. But then we discovered the bank on yourself strategy. And so we started packing money into our policies while we maintained the minimum payments on our debts. Okay, so we kept current there. As we built up wealth inside our policies, it grew to such a point that we borrowed against our policy and wiped out our debts one at a time.
Wow.
And the neat thing
Nice.
here, yeah, it was so cool. And the neat thing was when you borrow from these policies, they continue to grow. The policy continues to grow as if you had not borrowed against them.
Right. Yep.
So I'll say that again because that's mind-boggling to a lot of
Yep.
folks. When I borrow from this policy, I get the full dividend and interest, even on the capital I borrowed, as if I hadn't touched a dime of it. So if I've got $100,000 in my cash value, and I borrow out $30,000 to buy a car or pay off a debt, that year I'm going to get the full interest and dividend as if I had not taken that $30,000 out. I'd get the full interest and dividend on the entire $100,000, even though I had a loan for $30,000 against the policy.
Yes, that is very beautiful. I'm glad you
So,
mentioned that. So we have two more questions for you. I definitely want people to know how they can reach you. We know we can listen to your podcast, but I want you to give them more details on how to reach out to you. But before we go there, the second question that we ask every guest is, what is the best advice you've ever received, or the advice you wish somebody would have told you?
mm, wow. I think that the best advice, maybe it's that focusing question. What's the one thing you can do with your money such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? That's been revolutionizing my whole life. What's the one thing you can do with your parenting?
Mm,
What's the one thing you can do with your health? What's the one thing you can do with your hobby, right? Whatever
yeah.
you're doing here to make everything else easier or unnecessary. And then a follow up to that is until I get my one thing done today, everything else is a distraction. That's a
Mm.
great piece. That's been really hitting me in between the eyes lately, Kane,
Yes,
as
I
far as
know.
a
I
piece
was
of
cracking up.
advice.
Oh my God. I'm like, that's what we're talking about in our company. It's like
Oh, love it.
one thing, one thing, one thing, one thing.
Love it.
And then if
Mm.
if they give me all these other things they did, and I'm like, okay, so you were distracted. That's it. That's all. That's
Love
really
it.
what it boils down to. Including
Yeah.
myself. Like not yeah.
And I'll give one extra credit piece here if you want. The
Okay.
next is like also controlling the environment where your money lives really is the smallest hinge that can swing the biggest door. If you
Mm,
control where your money lives, you win. You just win. And if someone else controls where your money lives, banks, 401k, then they're going to win. It's just plain and simple. But it's been
yeah.
an eye opener for me in the last 10 years to figure that out.
Oh, I forgot to ask this one question because I don't know this about this strategy. But can you do this with retirement money, or is this not is this
Mm.
qualified or not qualified? So that's what
Yeah, the fancy word is non-qualified. You got to put
got
this
it.
money in after tax,
Got
and
it.
then it grows, and it's sort of like in some ways it's a lot like a Roth IRA in terms of how it's taxed,
Got it.
but without all the restrictions of a Roth IRA. Yeah, so you can access this money for retirement needs tax free, but we cannot put this whole life policy inside a 401k.
401k. Got it. Okay. And that's what I thought. I just wanted to remember if that was
Hmm.
right. Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Awesome. And I like the way you prefaced it, like looking at it like a Roth IRA. That's a really easy
Hmm.
way to see it.
Yeah, in fact,
Um,
Google rich person's Roth on Google. You'll see what
oh
I'm talking about.
yeah. Okay, great. Thank you
Cool.
for adding that. So, can you please tell us how we can reach? I want to make sure I stay in touch with you
Yeah,
because I
love
love this,
love that.
and I want to make sure our listeners stay in touch with you and listen to your podcast and follow you wherever you are, and just come into your world.
Well, I love what you're doing. I love that you're bringing awareness here in this month to our finances. I think one of the biggest sources of stress is money, right or wrong. I mean, heck, even Jesus talked more about money than he did about heaven. So that should tell us something, right? But yeah, the best way for folks that want to keep in touch would be to listen to our show, Not Your Average Financial Podcast. But if you want to, you can just remember this one website. It's solution2cashflow.com. Solution2cashflow.com. And you can spell it either with the number 2 or TO. So that's solution2cashflow.com. And you can find our show. You can connect with me. You can connect with one of my colleagues. We work with folks anywhere in the United States.
Okay, and I just have to give you one last compliment. Freaking marketing genius to buy
Oh,
both of
thanks.
those. I'm just
Thank you.
saying.
That's somebody else, someone way smarter than me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was some marketing genius right there because
Thanks.
you do run up against that and you're like, "Don't worry,
Hmm.
no worries. Just go to either one,
Hmm.
whichever one comes
Yeah.
to mind for you."
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mark. This has been so much fun, so enlightening, so educational even. And usually education costs, and you just educated us for free. So, thank you.
Well, I just try to do what you're doing all the time. You've got a great show. I've been loving. You've got a new subscriber with me. You're doing a great
Oh,
job. Keep up the great work.
thank you so much. Well, I look forward to us talking again. Maybe we can continue this conversation over at your podcast, but I've had a great time today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, guys. So that is our show for today. Thank you so much for being here. And go check out Mark. I'm just saying, you need to go check out Mark. If you're thinking about it, stop thinking about it. Remember, here on Presidential Experience, we take action. We're not sayers, we are doers. So go do. All right. And I'll see you next week. Hey, I'm wondering, do you feel like it's time to manage your stress so you can enjoy your success? Have you gotten to the point where you'd rather be appreciated for who you are rather than what you do? Well, if finding meaning in life is a high priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a good fit for working with me and my team over here at Presidential Lifestyle, here's what I want you to do. Head on over to presidentiallifestyle.com/private-conversation to book a private conversation with me so we can determine what's stopping you from creating that meaningful life. You'll get on the phone with me for about 60 minutes to get to the bottom of what's stressing you right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, like how much money do you want to have, how healthy do you want to be, how much love do you want to give and receive. What will happen is we'll take a closer look at where you are right now, as well as where you want to be. And if me and my team can help you bridge the gap between those two, we'll show you the fastest way. We help CEOs and high achievers all over the world navigate through stress so they can enjoy their success and turn their money into meaning. So to see if we can help you do that same thing, head on over to presidentiallifestyle.com/private-conversation or simply click the link in the show notes. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Want to reduce your stress even more? Here are 4 ways you can do it. 1, send us your questions. Ask us anything about money, marriage, or maturing. You can send it to podcast@presidentiallifestyle.com. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast. You wouldn't want to miss an episode. That would be stressful. And number 3, get our prosperity report recap. It's a free resource where we share top tools and resources. Just go to presidentiallifestyle.com/blog/prosperity report. Don't worry, it's in the show notes. You won't have to remember that. And if you really want to connect with us in a deep and powerful way, join our private club. Go to joinpresidentialexperience.com to find out when our doors open again. We want you to be there so you can turn your money into meaning. And if you're enjoying this podcast, go ahead and leave us a rating and a comment, and we'll be sure to thank you. And now for the legalese. Remember, this podcast is not to replace professional counsel. The best advice comes from a professional you know. The topics discussed in this podcast are general in nature and are for informational and entertainment purposes only. We encourage you to meet with a professional that you can discuss your specific situation with, whether therapeutic or otherwise. That's all for now. I'll see you next episode. And remember, you can have wealth in all of its forms. Believe it, and you will soon see it.